Watch how everything changes when you stop chasing people and start chasing what you're meant to do. Sometimes life teaches you the same lesson over and over again until you finally understand it. And one of the hardest lessons you'll ever learn is this: no matter how much you love people, no matter how deeply you care, no matter how hard you try to be enough for them, you cannot force someone to stay who was never meant to grow with you. There comes a moment when you finally get tired, not tired of loving, but tired of breaking yourself just to keep people who were perfectly fine watching you fall apart. And something inside you whispers that maybe the reason your heart hurts is not because you're losing them, but because you've been losing yourself while chasing them. There is a point in every person's life when they must decide who they are going to be. Someone who keeps stretching their worth to fit into someone else's life, or someone who rises into a version of themselves that no longer begs for space in rooms they were not designed for. And that decision changes everything, because when you chase people, you shrink, you bend, you break. You start walking away from the path that was meant for you. You trade your purpose for temporary attention, your calling for conditional love, your dreams for the fragile comfort of not being alone. But life keeps trying to pull you back. Life keeps trying to remind you that the more you chase people, the further you move from the person you were born to become. And when you ignore that calling long enough, something in your soul begins to ache. Not because you're empty, but because you're full of potential that you keep postponing. And that pain becomes a quiet but constant reminder that there is more for you than the people who walked away, more for you than the places you've outgrown, more for you than the versions of yourself that played small just to be accepted. There is a truth the world doesn't tell you. You don't lose people when you choose purpose. You lose the people who are blocking your purpose. You don't lose love. You lose distraction. You don't lose support. You lose noise. And when the noise fades, your clarity returns. You start hearing your own thoughts again. You start remembering who you were before you let people convince you that you needed them to feel whole. You begin to see that the relationships you were chasing were never aligned with your future. They were only aligned with your fear. Fear of being alone. Fear of being misunderstood. Fear of not being enough. And fear is powerful. It can make you hold on to things that hurt you. It can make you fight for connections that have already ended. It can make you romanticize what broke you. But courage sets you free. Courage is what makes you step back and say, if I have to chase it, it's not mine. If I have to beg for it, it's not love. If I have to lose myself to keep it, it's not worth keeping. And the moment you embrace that truth, your life begins to shift. Not suddenly, not dramatically, but quietly, gently, naturally. You start investing your energy differently. You start choosing peace over approval. You start choosing progress over validation. You start choosing your future over your history. And before you know it, you're not chasing people anymore. You're chasing purpose. You're chasing growth. You're chasing a life that feels like yours again, and that shift is what unlocks everything that was meant for you. Because when you chase purpose, the right people start appearing without being chased. The right opportunities start finding you without forcing anything. The right energy surrounds you because your path finally aligns with who you truly are. Purpose has a way of attracting what is meant for you and repelling what is not. And you begin to realize that the people who left were not a loss. They were a clearing. They were making space for the life that's coming. They were creating room for the version of you that doesn't settle. They were rewriting your circle so it could finally match your calling. But chasing purpose is not easy. It requires unlearning years of people, pleasing, reprogramming the belief that your worth is measured by how many people like you, and rebuilding a relationship with yourself strong enough to stand alone when necessary. It requires saying no to people who once defined your identity. It requires facing the silence you used to run from. It requires choosing long-term fulfillment over short-lived comfort. but the reward is growth. Real growth, the kind that changes your posture, your vision, your standards, your entire direction. And with that growth comes a version of you that looks back and wonders why you ever begged for permission to be enough. You begin to understand that life is not supposed to be spent chasing people who don't choose you. Life is supposed to be spent building the kind of purpose that makes people respect you even from a distance, even in silence, even after they've gone. You start realizing that the moments you thought were breaking you were actually shaping you. The rejection that hurt you was guiding you. The silence that scared you was teaching you. The endings you cried over were protecting you. Life was not punishing you. It was positioning you. And when that realization hits you, you finally breathe. Not a shallow breath of survival, but a deep breath of becoming. You breathe like someone who is done begging. Someone who is done chasing. Someone who is done shrinking. Someone who is ready to rise into the purpose they've been postponing. You start walking differently. You start thinking differently. You start trusting the timing of your life instead of forcing connections that weaken you. You start choosing environments that nourish your growth instead of draining your spirit. The truth is, the world doesn't tell you how powerful you become when you stop chasing people. It doesn't tell you how magnetic authenticity is. It doesn't tell you how attractive purpose is. It doesn't tell you that the moment you stop running after people is the moment you start running toward the life you were created for. And the moment you do that, everything changes. You become unstoppable, you become undeniable, you become someone who no longer begs to be chosen because you've finally chosen yourself. There comes a moment when you look at your life and realize how much time you've spent trying to prove your worth to people who were never meant to see it. You replay the conversations where you explained yourself again and again, hoping they would finally understand your heart. You remember all the times you stayed when you should have walked away, all the times you apologized just to keep the peace, all the times you broke your own boundaries because you were terrified of losing someone who was already halfway out the door. And when you finally step away from that cycle, you don't just walk away from people. You walk toward a truth you have avoided for years. Your purpose was never meant to be validated by others. Your purpose was meant to be lived, breathed, built, protected, and honored by you. When you stop chasing people, you begin to see your own life with a clarity that was impossible when your energy was scattered. You start noticing how much emotional space other people occupied in your mind. You start feeling how heavy it was to carry relationships that only survived because you kept giving more than you had. And as that weight lifts, you begin reconnecting with parts of yourself you forgot existed. Suddenly, your dreams matter again, your voice matters again, your peace matters again. You feel the difference between being drained and being aligned. You start choosing what feeds your soul instead of what feeds your loneliness. And that is when purpose whispers, at first softly like an echo in the walls of your heart, a quiet reminder of who you were before you dimmed your light, a small stirring of what you were put on this earth to do. It might come as an idea, a pull, a feeling you can't shake, a moment of clarity that makes you pause. That whisper grows louder the more you step away from people who don't value your presence, because purpose doesn't compete with distraction. It waits until you're ready to hear it. And when you finally hear it, something inside you shifts. You no longer wake up asking who will stay, who will approve, who will notice. You wake up asking, what am I building? What am I becoming? What is calling me today? The beauty of purpose is that it gives you direction. It gives you identity separate from other people's opinions. It gives you strength that is not based on being liked, validated, or accepted. Purpose is the anchor that holds you steady when relationships change, when people leave, when seasons shift. But to step into that purpose, you must be willing to let go of the version of yourself that depended on chasing people for a sense of belonging. You must outgrow the need to prove yourself. You must outgrow the need to be chosen. You must outgrow the idea that your worth is something you earn by giving more than you receive. Letting go is not easy. It hurts to stop chasing the people you once prayed would stay. It hurts to accept that some relationships are not meant to survive the next chapter of your life. It hurts to realize that no matter how good your heart is, no matter how loyal you were, no matter how much you gave, some people were only meant to be part of your story long enough to teach you something. But pain is not always a punishment. Sometimes pain is the doorway to purpose. Sometimes the heartbreak is what pushes you into the kind of growth you kept avoiding. Sometimes the disappointment is what wakes you up to your own strength. We don't grow when life is comfortable. We grow when life pushes us out of what is familiar. We grow when we learn that forcing people to stay is not love. We grow when we understand that loyalty should never require self-abandonment. And once you learn that, something powerful happens inside you. You start protecting your energy like your life depends on it, because it does. You stop chasing people and start chasing opportunities that expand you. You stop begging to be understood and start expressing yourself with confidence. You stop running after those who don't care and start walking with purpose toward the future that does. Purpose demands discipline. It demands sacrifice. It demands you stop settling for approval and start striving for alignment. It asks you to show up differently. It asks you to grow in ways that scare you. It asks you to separate from anything that keeps you small. But it also gives you something priceless in return, a life that feels meaningful again, a life that wakes you up in the morning with excitement instead of anxiety, a life where your worth is not determined by who stays but by who you become. There is a power inside you that has been waiting for you to stop shrinking, a vision waiting for you to stop delaying, a future waiting for you to stop chasing the wrong people so you can finally chase the right path. And when you begin to honor that calling, you change. You stop needing closure because you understand that life closes doors for a reason. You stop clinging to old friendships because you understand that not everyone is meant to grow with you. You stop searching for acceptance because you finally accept yourself. And once you reach that point, your mindset transforms. You stop asking why people left and start asking why you were holding on to them for so long. You stop blaming yourself for being too much or not enough and start realizing that people's inability to value you is not a reflection of your worth. You begin to own your life. You begin to trust your journey. You begin to walk with a sense of calm confidence that comes from knowing you are aligned with something bigger than temporary relationships. When you stop chasing people, you reclaim your time. You reclaim your energy. You reclaim your heart. You reclaim every piece of yourself that you gave away hoping someone else would give it meaning. And in that reclaiming, you uncover your purpose. Not the purpose shaped by what others expect from you, but the purpose written deep inside your soul. The purpose that makes you feel alive. The purpose that feels like home. The purpose that fills the emptiness no relationship ever could. That is the moment you begin to experience life differently. You no longer move out of desperation but direction. You no longer speak from insecurity but intention. You no longer walk into rooms hoping to be noticed but knowing that you bring value just by being who you are. And from that point on, you are no longer driven by the fear of being alone. You are driven by the desire to fulfill what you were created to do. That shift is everything. It changes the way you love, the way you dream, the way you breathe, the way you show up in the world. There comes a time when you stop looking at people as the source of your happiness and start seeing them as part of your journey, not the reason for it. You begin to understand that no one can fill the space inside you that was designed for your dreams. No one can replace the meaning that comes from pursuing what lights up your spirit. And when that understanding settles into your heart, something incredible happens. You stop giving people the power to define your worth. You stop giving them the authority to decide your direction. You stop letting their attention or their absence control the way you see yourself. Instead, you turn inward. You turn toward your calling. You begin to remember that your life has a mission that no relationship can replace. As you shift your focus from chasing people to chasing purpose, you start realizing how much energy you wasted trying to convince others to see the value you carried all along. You remember the messages you sent that were ignored, the efforts that went unnoticed, the sacrifices that were never appreciated, and you look back not with anger but with clarity. You understand now that the people you chased were never rejecting you, they were redirecting you. They were part of the path, but not part of the destiny. Their chapter ended so your purpose could finally begin, and even though it hurt, it was necessary, because if they had stayed, you would have never discovered the strength you had to stand on your own. You would have never found the courage to rebuild. You would have never learned how powerful you are without the validation you once begged for. The truth is, life becomes quieter when you stop chasing people. At first, that silence feels unfamiliar. You're so used to noise, constant conversations, constant explanations, constant emotional negotiations, trying to hold on to connections that were slipping through your fingers. But when the noise stops, you begin to hear yourself again. You begin to hear your own thoughts without interruption, your own desires without guilt, your own intuition without fear, and in that silence you realize that you were never alone. You were simply disconnected from yourself. Growth often happens in quiet seasons, not dramatic seasons, not loud seasons, but in the hidden moments where you sit with your heartbreak, your confusion, your longing, and slowly rebuild your identity piece by piece. You start recognizing the patterns that kept you stuck. You understand why you kept running after people whose paths were not aligned with yours. You acknowledge the wounds that made you believe you had to earn love instead of receiving it freely. And as painful as that is, healing always begins with honesty, and honesty always leads to transformation. You start becoming someone you barely recognize, in the best way, someone who doesn't panic when people leave, someone who doesn't collapse under rejection, someone who doesn't measure their worth by how many people stay. You become someone grounded, someone intentional, someone whose value comes from within rather than from outside. You start making choices that protect your future instead of choices that protect your loneliness. You start showing up for yourself the way you once showed up for everyone else, and that shift is not small. That shift is monumental, because once you learn how to be whole without chasing people, you become unshakable. Purpose begins to reveal itself in layers. Sometimes it shows up in opportunities, sometimes in passions you forgot you had, sometimes in ideas that refuse to leave your mind, and sometimes it shows up through pain, the kind of pain that pushes you out of the life you've outgrown and into the life you were meant to build. Purpose is not something you chase. It's something you align with. It's something you grow into by letting go of everything that keeps you small. Purpose requires space. Space that you couldn't create while you were busy holding on to people who drained you. But now that you're free, that space begins to fill with meaning, direction, inspiration, and strength you didn't even know you had. And then something magical happens. The things you once begged for start coming toward you. The people you once chased are replaced by people who value you. The opportunities you once dreamed of start showing up because you're finally aligned with who you're meant to be. When you stop chasing others, you start attracting what belongs to you. That's the power of purpose. It gives you gravitational pull. It makes you magnetic. It makes you stand out not because you're trying, but because you're aligned. And with alignment comes confidence, not loud confidence, not ego-driven confidence, but a quiet, steady, unshakable confidence rooted in knowing your own direction, knowing your own worth, knowing that you no longer need to be chosen by others because you have finally chosen yourself. You become someone who walks into rooms with presence, not because people validate you, but because you know you bring something valuable to the table. You become someone who no longer waits for permission to become the person you were destined to be. This new version of you stops settling. You stop settling for friendships that drain your energy. You stop settling for relationships that make you question your worth. You stop settling for environments that suffocate your growth. You stop settling for a life that doesn't excite you. Instead, you rise, slowly at first, then with momentum. You begin saying yes to things that uplift you and no to things that pull you backwards. You begin surrounding yourself with people who challenge you to grow rather than people who keep you stuck. You begin choosing actions that align with your purpose instead of reactions that come from fear. There comes a day when you wake up and realize your heart no longer aches for the people who left. You no longer replay memories wondering what you could have done differently. You no longer feel the urge to chase conversations that have gone silent. And it's not because you've stopped caring. It's because you've started caring about yourself more. You've started realizing that your life is bigger than who stayed and who didn't. Your future is bigger than the relationships you lost. Your purpose is bigger than the pain you endured. And when you reach that point, you reclaim your power. You start building a future based on intention, not insecurity. You start dreaming again, not because someone else believes in you, but because you finally believe in yourself. You start embracing the idea that you deserve a life filled with meaning, connection, growth, and peace, not chaos, confusion, or emotional scarcity. You begin to live from a place of abundance rather than desperation. And that abundance becomes the foundation for everything you build next. This is the moment when life starts opening doors for you, not because you're chasing people, but because you're chasing purpose. Not because you're forcing connections, but because you're aligned with your path. Not because you're proving yourself, but because you're honoring yourself. And as those doors open, you step through them with the confidence of someone who knows they deserve more. Not because of pride, but because of growth, because of resilience, because of the inner work you've done to rise from the version of yourself that once begged for attention. There comes a moment in your journey when you finally understand that every person who left made room for the version of you who was waiting to be born. You stop seeing their absence as a loss and start seeing it as alignment. You recognize that the people who stayed only because you kept chasing them were never meant to walk with you into your purpose. And instead of feeling abandoned, you begin to feel cleared. Cleared of distractions, cleared of emotional noise, cleared of the attachments that kept you from hearing your own voice. This is the moment when you begin to rise without asking for permission. This is the moment when you begin to grow without needing applause. This is the moment when you finally take ownership of the life that has been calling your name for years. You start noticing how different life feels when your energy is no longer scattered. The things that once drained you no longer interest you. The conversations you used to force now feel heavy. The people you once chased no longer feel essential. And not because you hate them, not because you're bitter, but because you've outgrown the version of yourself that needed their attention to feel whole. You begin to see your life expanding in ways it never could while you were trying to belong in places that were too small for your destiny. And you realize that you were never meant to fit in. You were meant to evolve. The deeper you walk into your purpose, the more you begin to understand that your journey is not about impressing people. It's not about proving your worth. It's not about keeping everyone happy. It's about becoming the person you were created to be, a person who values peace over approval, a person who chooses authenticity over acceptance, a person who stands firm even when others don't understand their path. You begin to fall in love with the quiet strength that comes from knowing who you are and what you bring to the world. And with that strength comes a new kind of freedom, the freedom to grow without waiting for others to grow with you. Life begins to shift in your favor the moment you shift your focus from chasing people to chasing purpose. Opportunities that felt impossible begin to open. Doors you didn't know existed begin to unlock. Ideas flow more freely. Creativity awakens, energy returns, you feel lighter, clearer, more connected to yourself. You start to see that the future you're stepping into requires a version of you that is bold enough to let go of everything that held you back, and you become willing to let go, not because it's easy, but because holding on costs too much of your peace. You discover that purpose is not a single moment. It's a direction. It's a series of choices that slowly shape you into someone who no longer lives in reaction to the world, but in alignment with their deepest truth. Every time you choose growth over comfort, you move closer to your purpose. Every time you choose discipline over distraction, you move closer to your purpose. Every time you choose self-respect over validation, you move closer to your purpose. And the beautiful thing is, you begin to trust those choices. You begin to trust yourself. You begin to trust the journey. At some point, the healing becomes so deep that you stop questioning why people left. Instead, you thank life for removing anything that would have blocked the life you are now building. You stop replaying old conversations. You stop wondering what you could have done differently. You stop trying to rewrite a past that was never meant to be your future. And in that acceptance, you feel something powerful, a sense of inner stability you've never felt before, a calm that comes from no longer needing what once broke you, a confidence that comes from choosing yourself instead of chasing someone else. You start attracting different people now. People who appreciate your presence without needing to be convinced. People who value your energy instead of draining it. People who support your growth rather than fear it. People who don't feel threatened by your purpose but inspired by it. And the beautiful thing is, you no longer chase anyone. You no longer beg anyone to stay. You no longer lower your standards to make others comfortable. You simply stand in your worth, and from that place of self-respect, the right people naturally gravitate toward you. This is the transformation that happens when you choose purpose over people. You no longer need loud validation to feel seen. You no longer need constant reassurance to feel secure. You no longer need external approval to move forward. Instead, you carry yourself with a quiet strength that speaks louder than any words. A strength that tells the world you know who you are. A strength that no one can take from you because it was built from every moment you refused to break. And now, as you stand at this point in your journey, you understand why life had to remove certain people, close certain doors, and break certain comforts. It was preparing you, it was sharpening you, it was guiding you toward the version of yourself who is finally ready to stop surviving and start becoming. You realize that every ending was really a beginning. Every heartbreak was really a wake-up call. Every loss was really a redirection towards something far more meaningful than what you were holding on to. You begin to see your future with clarity. You begin to dream again, not with fear, but with excitement. You begin to feel alive in ways you forgot were possible, and you know deep within yourself that you are exactly where you need to be, not chasing, not begging, not shrinking, but rising, becoming, aligning. You are stepping into a life that reflects the truth of who you are, and in this moment you make yourself a promise to never chase people again, a promise to never abandon yourself for the sake of being chosen. A promise to never lose your identity just to fit into someone else's life. You promise to live with intention, not desperation, with purpose, not pressure, with strength, not fear. You promise to honor your journey, protect your peace, and build a future that reflects your worth. Because the truth is, the most powerful version of you is the one who knows their purpose and refuses to let anything, or anyone, pull them away from it. The most unstoppable version of you is the one who no longer chases people but chases growth, healing, legacy, meaning. The most authentic version of you is the one who lives guided by purpose rather than controlled by attachment. And as you walk forward now, you carry everything you've learned. You carry your resilience. You carry your wisdom. You carry your courage. You carry the lessons that shaped you. And you walk with a different kind of confidence. A confidence rooted in the understanding that purpose will never require you to lose yourself. Purpose will never ask you to beg. Purpose will never demand that you shrink. Purpose will always call you higher, push you deeper, and guide you toward the life you were meant to live, so you keep walking. Not backward, not sideways, but forward with clarity, with intention, with a heart that is no longer chasing people but choosing purpose. With a spirit that is no longer trying to fit in but ready to stand out. with a mind that is no longer afraid of losing people, because it finally understands that the only thing you should never lose is yourself. You move forward into a chapter of life where you rise without apology, grow without hesitation, and love yourself without condition. And from this point on, everything changes, not because people changed, but because you did. Not because the world became easier, but because you became stronger. Not because life stopped testing you, but because you started walking with purpose instead of fear. You understand now that the moment you stop chasing people is the moment you start living, truly living, deeply living, purposefully living, and that life, the life built on intention, alignment, self-respect, and inner truth, is the life you were always meant to create.